Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Unsold Podcast. Today I'm very excited to have a very interesting guest, Kartik Patiar. Welcome. Thank you so much for giving your time. Kartik, how are you doing?
Thanks, Santhosh. Pleasure to be here. Doing very well. In fact, excited for this conversation and really looking forward to what comes out of this.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling.
When I looked you up on LinkedIn, I read your profile and I thought, man, you've worked in some really cool companies, especially Indian companies. So I want to open the conversation with a very simple question. Can you give us a brief idea about what your journey has been?
Yeah. So yeah, Santhosh, I think I would say I've had the privilege of working with some of the best known brands in India. And in fact, maybe I'll start the journey and kind of go chronologically, right? And of course, feel free to pause me wherever you want to double click. So from the starting, I would say I've had an engineering upbringing from a pedagogy point of view. Post-engineering worked for 3 years in a B2B sales kind of a role in the metal cutting industry. Post that, did my MBA from SPJ in Bombay and then kind of switched gears completely, right? Moved from the B2B metal cutting sales kind of a role into a sales role, but in the FMCG space, right? And I think that was fantastic for a great sales foundation that one can get, right? So I joined Cadbury, which was called Mondelez after the Kraft acquisition. And from selling cutting tools in North Karnataka, I was selling chocolates in Odisha, right? Like that's like the stark contrast, right? But I think from a learning point of view, it was fantastic because it helps you understand that, the B2B institutional sales for selling cutting tools is very different from, let's say, managing FMCG distributors, where let's say you're trying to grab market share from a Nestle, from a Ferrero, etc. in a market like, so I was based out of Odisha. I was the area sales manager for Odisha. So how do you kind of tackle that? And FMCG is a lot about numeric distribution, right? How do you get distribution to more and more stores so that you can actually win, market share, etc. So pivoted from a traditional industrial sales to an FMCG post my MBA. And then I think after having worked for 2 years odd in Cadbury, that was actually the time I would say was an inflection point for the internet e-commerce industry in India. And then I kind of consciously made a choice that, hey, I want to be a part of, this growing e-commerce space. And I was lucky enough to be one of the early employees at OLX India. So probably I was employee number 55 or 60. And it was very early days for OLX India, right? So OLX was a global company and it was just setting up the India operations. So essentially, if you think about OLX, right, the thesis is it's a C2C classifieds platform, right? Your buy side is a consumer, your sell side is also a consumer, right? And essentially, my mandate was how do you come in there and kind of fuel the growth for the platform, right? So it was kind of creating a category of online classifieds within the country, right? So it was my kind of a category creation work that we were trying to do.
Correct.
And because both sides are a consumer, right? You actually need a lot of marketing to reach out to people to kind of sell on the platform.
Right.
So our thesis was that if you get more sellers to list on the platform, that's when you get more buyers and then you get a flywheel effect of more buyers, more sellers, and that's how you kind of grow the platform, right? So of course, I pivoted. So in my journey, right, there were two important pivots. One is I pivoted from a traditional FMCG sale to a new age e-commerce, e-classifieds brand. And secondly, I pivoted from sales to pure marketing, right? Because here the thesis that, or at least my role was, how do I reach out through marketing to a lot of people to sell on the platform, right? And since it was early days, while of course, we did a lot of digital marketing, etc. And it was early days of building the category. We also worked with a lot of ATL and BTL to actually build the category. So when I say ATL, we did a lot of television commercials, BTL in terms of college activations, etc. to kind of make the people aware of the classified category. In fact, we did some very fantastic campaigns. So worked with Low Lintas, who was a creative agency. We did OLX Pe Bech De, if you would remember, right? That was a viral campaign about the entire classified space. So learned a lot from the marketing lens, like shifting from a sales to a marketing lens. Of course, we were chasing how do you increase listing base on the platform. That was our core KPIs, right? How do you improve your net new listings on the platform, your net daily unique listers on the platform. But I think the two reflections on what I learned very well from that was, one is even our offline strategies in marketing were very, very data driven. What I mean by that is, let's say if you look at e-classifieds as a space, right? One is you have categories. So the highest obsolescence category is actually a mobile phone, because within 12 to 18 months, people change phones,
Right.
upgrade, etc., right? So that was the number one category across all of India. But if you look at the number two category, it actually varied by geography. So at that point in time, your number two category in a Delhi NCR was a four-wheeler auto.
Okay.
And in a Bangalore was, let's say, a home and furniture, because people were shifting in and out of the city, etc. So a lot of our offline media choices, let's say if you're doing a print, outdoor, etc., was also informed by categories that were seeing traction.
So data played a very, very important role.
So yeah, it was, and that was very interesting learning, right? Because see, in digital, it's very easy to optimize, right? You take an end funnel, later optimize for CPI, cost per install, or cost per whatever, CPM, whatever. But then here it was taking offline media, which is so hard to measure, quantify, etc., and then inform those, data is informing you some of these decisions in terms of what creatives do you lead with, what categories do you lead with, in which geography, right? So it was an interesting stint, learned a lot there from a marketing lens, you can say. And then kind of moved to Flipkart. So at Flipkart, it was again a very interesting journey. I was leading this team called Demand Shaping and Growth. And essentially, our team had two main charters, right? So the biggest and most important charter was managing and kind of end-to-end owning all the marquee sale events that Flipkart did, right? Okay. So one is, of course, the Big Billion Days was like the center and the crown jewel.
Tentpole event.
That's the tentpole.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have smaller category, cross-category events that happen through the year. And the way we think of this, at least internally at that point in time, was every of those smaller events were a test bed for BBD, right? So you do a lot of testing. It could be product level A/B testing. It could be what category is working, what discount level structures, etc., or constructs of the event. And then everything kind of leads up to a playbook that you can define to say, how do you execute a well-structured BBD across, the 5 days that you're going to do it, right? So that was one part of the charter, which was like the larger part. The smaller part was kind of working very closely with product teams to do a lot of A/B testing even for BAU, saying that, hey, let's say there's a flash sale of mobiles that we did. So what are the cross-sell, upsell opportunities? It could be accessories, cases, covers, etc., etc. So what else can we kind of upsell, cross-sell to users coming on the platform? Or depending on the objective of the platform, we used to run a lot of tests. So typically a GMV function is simply ASP into conversion into units. That's equal to your GMV. And let's say in a particular quarter, your objective is to maximize GMV.
Okay.
So you increase the ASP weightage and let's say reduce the others and do an A/B test and see if is your GMV per visit actually going up or down, right? And the beauty is that Flipkart has such high traffic, right? That within 6-7 days, you get statistically significant results to say A/B is working, not working, do you need to scale, etc., etc. So again, to take a counter example, let's say if you want to increase supply chain utilization over necessarily GMV, you increase the weight of units and reduce the other two.
Right.
So then you do that similar A/B to see that, hey, is my high unit category, which is a lifestyle accessories, actually getting traction or not, right? So did some of these wonderful A/B tests to see what is scaling, what is not scaling. Many a times we used to go in with a hypothesis and we were proven wrong. Many a time very counter intuitive data used to come up. I'll give you an example of that, right? So for example, we generally thought that typically if you're doing a high ASP purchase, right, the wallet share of a consumer is limited, right? So we'll not do multiple high ASP purchases. And incidentally, we were seeing pockets of, at least within metros, where people were making multiple high ASP purchases, right? So people were purchasing large appliances like fridge, microwave, etc., in a shorter duration, right? And when we actually double-clicked and started seeing this, we saw that people were probably shifting or moving into a new place, and hence a lot of new appliances come in at that point in time, right? So it was very counter, right? Because as a person from the inside, you would think that, hey, high ASP, his wallet is kind of utilized for the month or whatever, that life cycle of the user. But some of these insights helped us to sharpen our strategies in terms of what we surface on our apps, right? Because the team that I managed also looked at merchandising and content strategy of the platform, which is to say, what do you surface, right? So one is your recommendations engine, which let's say you're buying a shirt, it'll show you different sizes, colors, etc. But the merchandising strategy is to say, what does the platform want to optimize for? And hence, can I surface more of that so that we kind of hit our objectives, right? So yeah, I did that in Flipkart for about 2 years, and then kind of moved out of Flipkart and joined Swiggy. So Swiggy was also a very interesting journey.
Which year was Swiggy?
Swiggy was, 2017 was my last BBD in Flipkart, and that's when I moved out and kind of joined Swiggy. Very interesting stage where I joined Swiggy. So in fact, I joined Swiggy when we were in, I think, 6 or 7 cities, just operating there. And I think by the time I left, which was like 2 years down the line, we were in 240 cities, 230 cities. So kind of the massive scale up that Swiggy saw, at least from a food tech perspective, is what I had the opportunity to kind of see there. And here, interestingly, again, my role was very different from what I'd done in, let's say, in OLX and Flipkart.
Okay.
So here I was leading the national accounts charter for Swiggy. What that means is, essentially, Swiggy at that point in time as a food tech, you would know, is connects restaurants to consumers, right? What I was doing was think of all these pan-India bigger chains. Let's say think of QSRs like Pizza Hut, Domino's, Burger King, or cloud kitchens like Fasos, Fresh Menu, so on. Now, all of these pan-India outlets was classified as national accounts because of 2 reasons. One is they have a pan-India presence. So typically they would have multiple outlets. So let's say Swiggy is present in 200 cities. These guys are also present in roughly about the same. And secondly, you have a centralized decision-making structure. So you have a CDO, like a chief digital officer, a chief marketing officer, some central guy who takes a call on the overall delivery strategy for all the outlets in the country, right? So you don't need to go state by state, outlet by outlet, right? So it was very interesting because one is me and my team were chasing a very different thing compared to the rest of the org at that point in time, because rest of the org was in a supply acquisition mode, saying that, hey, get more and more restaurants on the platform. Let's build supply depth on the platform. And me and my team were like, hey, these guys are on the platform. How do you actually make their business grow, right? So how do you actually go to them and say that, hey, these are the things that we can do to actually increase, your orders on the platform?
So local acquisition versus national sustenance.
National growth, sustenance, and so on, right? And to think about it, right? Like we were also one of the very profitable, I won't say profitable, but at least high contribution margins in the P&L, right? Reason for that is typically your national account portfolio will give you a higher average order value compared to local accounts.
Okay.
Right? Because typically, let's say if you are buying from a KFC, Burger King, it's typically a slightly higher average order value.
Fair.
And because as a platform, your commissions are linked as a percentage to order value, you earn more.
Correct.
And secondly, we also kind of build this entire charter on monetization, because bigger brands typically spend money to acquire, right?
Performance.
Yeah. And our pitch necessarily was to say that, hey, if you're spending on a YouTube or a Meta, etc., these are pure awareness channels, but people come here to eat, right? So there is conversion platform. So essentially, how do you get even the brand monies onto our platform for them to advertise, right? So there's a dual kind of income stream from these set of accounts. And it was, used to contribute to, I think, about 22-23% of the overall GMV of the overall platform at that point in time. But again, fantastic. It was a very fantastic time, because the time when we used to go to these partners, right? Many of them used to say that, hey, why don't I spend on my own app and try to build that, right? Rather than trying to build on like Swiggy and Zomato was small at that point, right? Like why shouldn't I, as Burger King, spend on Burger King delivery, for example, right? It's my own app, or McD spend on their own app. And it took us a while to convince that, hey, we are not here as a competitor. We are here as a partner for growth.
Right.
And I think even the tide was changing at that point of time, because soon even they realized that, hey, a consumer will not download 5 different apps to order food. Exactly. They will have an aggregator app on which they can choose any restaurant, right? And hence, how do I be more than fair share on the aggregator app so that I get maximum conversions, etc., etc. So I think that was a very interesting phase, right? There to kind of make them understand that we are here to partner for growth and not necessarily competition. And I think the second element which was also very interesting, is that we actually, I would say, led the digital buying journey for a lot of these bigger chains as well, right? See, because the food, at least the retail food space, was very offline. And I would say even today is, right? Because a lot of these store managers or even the regional country heads typically have a same store sales growth target, right? So even if you look at earnings calls of some of these bigger listed companies, right, like Jubilant, etc., everybody talks about same store sales growth, which is SSSG, right? But we came with a very different mindset, saying, how do you sell on digital, right? Saying that, hey, is your store getting underutilized in the offline space? How do I do growth hacks to make it grow faster online, right? So that with the same fixed capex, I'm actually giving you higher turnover on your kitchen utilization, etc., etc.
Efficiency.
And it's more efficient because I don't need waiting staff.
Correct.
I don't need such high real estate, so on and so forth, right? So I think that was, again, a very interesting leg to kind of sell to restaurants, and especially the bigger brands. And of course, for cloud kitchens, that's the main value prop, right? So that kind of worked well. So yeah, I did that for slightly under 2 years. Then kind of moved again to this time I moved to Lenovo. So at Lenovo, I was basically part of the Asia Pac team, Asia Pacific marketing team,
Okay.
and I was looking at marketing strategy and operations for Lenovo.
Right.
Again, very interesting play because Lenovo works in, you can say, 3 different business segments. One is B2C, which is selling to consumers either online, offline. The B2B part is actually split into 2 parts, right? So there's a VLE and SME, which is very large enterprise and a small medium enterprise. And if you think of APAC as a market, we actually looked at India, of course, was one key market. Then Japan was our biggest market. Then we had whole of what we call a Central Asia Pacific, which is Australia, which is actually Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, etc. And then you had mature markets, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, Singapore. And then you had Australia, New Zealand. So whole of Asia minus China basically was APAC for us. And if you think of these countries on one axis and these 3 segments on the other axis, so one of the key things that my role was essentially how do you do the right kind of, say, budget deployment across these vectors of countries and segments, right? And a lot of it is to do with not just historical, what have we spent in the past, but to say, hey, what's market maturity in each of these segments? What is competition doing? What is our campaign planning for the full year? And then more importantly, after the budget has been assigned, how do you do quarterly check-ins to ensure are we on track, right, with our KPIs, right? Because it's very different. Like there's no templatized approach for all because some are mature markets where, let's say, penetration is very high, competition intensity is very high, and the kind of campaigning that you do is a slightly more bottom funnel, conversion driven, sales outcome oriented versus, let's say, an emerging market where penetration is low. While there are competitors, the share itself is pretty, low. And you do a little more top to mid funnel campaigns, and hence your KPIs would be very different assessment, right? So how do you figure out that for the budgets that you're assigning, what's the right set of KPIs to measure against? And then when do you course correct, saying that, hey, I need to pull back budgets, deploy it elsewhere, etc., etc. So again, gave me an exposure to work cross-cultural, cross-country kind of a thing. So it was very interesting role there.
Was this during the pandemic?
This was largely during the pandemic. Yeah. So most of it was, unfortunately, couldn't travel to these places, but most of this was on meetings and.
Yeah, but the demand for devices, I mean, it just peaked during the.
Correct. It was, I would say, for the entire, the laptops, tablet market, this was the golden period. Because everybody not just had a work laptop, they needed one for their kid to school. They needed one more personal one, tablet. And so all of these categories that were either plateauing or just, kind of being around there, suddenly saw a spike during COVID because the demand for hardware actually increased in the houses. So every house became a 2 to 3 device household.
Correct.
As against your one standard laptop or whatever office gives you, right? So a lot of personal consumption hardware also actually picked up in a very big way.
What was leisure and luxury became a necessity.
Absolutely. So COVID kind of redefined that for the space. And yeah, I mean, it was also interesting because we were just coming out of the phase where, of course, there was chip shortage in between, which of course continues to be there. But I think the demand was far outstripping the supply because of both ends, right, being constrained. But I think that's a good place to be, right? Rather than demand being low and you're flooded with supply. So again, great experience there at Lenovo. Post Lenovo, I moved gears completely again. I moved to the OTT side, moved to the media and entertainment space. So I joined Disney plus Hotstar. And here, basically, I was looking at, so the way we look at Disney plus Hotstar is that there are 2 revenue streams, right? There's subscription and ads, which is AVOD, right? On the ad side of the business, I was essentially looking at a couple of verticals and kind of trying to increase our ads share of business coming from these verticals, right?
Okay.
So these verticals included online, e-commerce, D2C. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
It also included handsets, computing, and also consumer durables, infra, telco, paint. So these were the bunch of categories that I was looking at. And objective was very simple, right? How do you get many of these brands to start considering OTT as a strong medium to spend and build awareness, salience, etc. And essentially, how do you increase share of wallet from the likes of, say, YouTube, Meta, etc. to kind of get people to spend on OTT, right? So that was the key charter over here. Again, OTT space is very, very different, very dynamic. Lot of, like we were discussing, right, just before we started, a lot of what you monetize on OTT is driven by content, right? So marquee tentpole events have much higher take rates, CPMs, so on and so forth, right? Like your cricket would be priced, if it's a World Cup, IPL, would be a very high pull property, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we looked at entertainment very differently and cricket very differently, or sports very differently, right? Because in sports, you have, of course, your cricket, Wimbledon, football, etc., EPL, for example. And in entertainment is a more regular, recurring month-on-month business with a few tentpoles that will come in the year. Like, so for example, you have a Coffee with Karan, where you can do deeper integration with brands, get to write more money, and so on and so forth. So kind of balanced both sides of the portfolio to ensure that there is growth on entertainment and sports side of the business, at the same time kind of growing book of business for Hotstar.
Incredibly.
So yeah, I did that for about 2 years, and more recently, about 5-6 months back, I'm with ShareChat.
Okay.
So essentially, ShareChat as a company owns 2 products, right? So there is ShareChat and Moj. Again, very, very, very interesting space, because I moved from OT to the social media space, right? And again, very different dynamics. ShareChat, as maybe you would know, like a lot of us may not be users of ShareChat, right? Because ShareChat primarily is a social media platform that is very language first, that is very vernac first. So a large part of the core ShareChat audience is actually a tier 2, tier 3, slightly more older audience. So when I say slightly older, yeah, it is more, I would say 18 to 40 kind of a bracket.
Okay.
The other platform that ShareChat owns is Moj.
Correct.
Moj is basically like TikTok, right? Which is short form video. And so if one is to visualize, right, ShareChat is like a cross between a Reddit and a Meta with video feed interlaced. And Moj is simply TikTok, right? Short form video, one after the other, right? Both the platforms at a very different life stage, right? So what I mean by that is ShareChat is now 9-10 years old in the market, has a fairly, decent, strong adoption base, and so on and so forth. And Moj is slightly more younger in the market, right? So Moj is about 3-4 years old,
right?
Born out of the TikTok ban that happened in the country. And if you would remember, Santhosh, I think at that point in time, there were at least like 8-10 companies in India saying we'll be the next Indian TikTok. Yes. But think about it today, right? Like today, there is hardly any Indian player, definitely. Yes. Of course, there are a lot of these shorts and reels, etc., which is all the global, the walled gardens.
Yeah.
But very few Indian companies that are scaling on social and short form. And I think the thesis behind that is that your Rexis or your recommendation system engine needs to be really powerful for a user to be sticky on the app. See, because social media is very feed driven, right? If the consumer is not getting engaged in the first couple of seconds, maybe the first 3, 4, 5 scrolls, then you're going to be deleted, right? It's like
correct.
The consumer is very ruthless, right? Especially when he's coming to you for infotainment, entertainment, etc., right? You don't have too many chances, right?
Correct.
So I think what ShareChat has done very differently is that they've got a lot of course, I think not when AI became a buzzword, right? Even from the day when they started, they actually had a lot of AI to build the recommendation system. And now, of course, there is a lot of data and so on and so forth. But I think the great thing is that as a network, right, between ShareChat and Moj, today there are roughly about 330 million monthly actives, right? So which is like the third largest after Google and Meta, right? So it's a fairly big scaled platform. Right. And of course, my role continues to be in terms of how do you get monetization on the platform and some of these bigger marquee brands onto the platform.
So Moj has a younger audience,
correct? Yeah. So because it's more short form,
right?
It's slightly more tier 1, tier 2, unlike tier 2 and 3 ShareChat. And it has a younger demographic. So more like 13 to 30, unlike let's say 18 to 35, more like 13 to 25, I would say, not even 30. And in fact, and this is a very surprising thing that even some of, let's say, the clients who work and advertise with us don't sometimes have a misconception that, hey, all your ShareChat users must also be Moj users, so overlap must be high. But that's not the case. So the overlap is only 5%, right? So ShareChat has almost a 180 million MAU, and Moj has about a 165 million MAU. And when I say platform MAU is 325 million, that means your overlap is actually just 5% or thereabouts, right? So in fact, when we do a lot of these consumer dipsticks, right, a lot of ShareChat core users don't know about Moj and vice versa, right? So it's like very different audience types, very different use cases that they're solving for. So for example, think about it, right? A youngster on Moj, right, is actually coming to, of course, enjoy content, etc., etc. But now with the entire piece around hashtag challenge, hook steps, and all of these things that are happening, right? And of course, I mean, even Instagram reels, all of that is promoting a lot of that, challenges. A lot of this, a lot of people, especially across the country, feel that, hey, even we are a creator, right? So for example, of course, on Moj, we work with a lot of creators on as an ecosystem, right? But literally, it's like democratizing who can create content, right? Like that's what social media does so well. And the question to ask is then why ShareChat and Moj, right? Because there's so many social media platforms, right? And here I think the biggest moat that ShareChat as a network has is being language first. Because if you start going beyond tier one, even in tier one, I would say, right, a lot of people actually don't consume regular content in English or Hindi. Right? Like all the walled gardens are made for Hindi, English or English content.
Correct.
But let's say you're a Tamil user,
Right.
you're a Telugu user, Malayalam, you would relate a lot more
Right.
if somebody speaking my language, right? Especially as you start going down social strata, right? So that's where a big moat exists, right? Because we have a lot of creators, influencers. They may not be like celebrities, but they'll be micro, nano, with a very strong engagement, saying that, hey, the engagement with our small base is super high.
Right.
So much so that many of these guys actually gift their creators in terms of monetary value, money.
Wow.
Right? And that's a pretty big, I would say, business opportunity for us. Right? Because a lot of these people are doing microtransactions in the form of coins, buying coins, gifting to their creators and so on. So that's another kind of line of business for us. Right? So that's a little bit about where I've dabbled with over the last 16 years. Yeah.
Fantastic journey, actually. My next question is a beautiful segue. I mean, if we go back 30 years, just a generation ago, who could have envisioned India creating and consuming apps like this? We didn't.
Yeah.
But technology changed. 4G, 5G, fiber, and even today, I used DigiYatra for the first time the last year. Just cut the queue at the airport. You just scan your face, right? Even before you enter the airport, the lounge, and you have a separate queue. Eventually, probably the queue might swell, but ideally, it's what I mean to say is our appetite to embrace technology. I mean, it's fantastic. Who could have thought that this would happen? So, naturally, the quality of products, we talk about Flipkart and Hotstar and ShareChat, has gone up. Because I don't, every morning when I fire up my phone, I don't pick and choose, let me use an Indian app, and then I move to an American app, then a Chinese app. Nobody thinks like that. Because that is the quality, the standard we expect. Right? I switch from ShareChat or Moj to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I don't discriminate. There is no distinction there. So when there is tremendous appetite to embrace technology and there are world-class products, how exciting or challenging is it to build world-class products to a segment like this in a new India, if you could call that?
Yeah, no, very, very interesting question actually, because, and if you were to think back, right, you're absolutely right. Like we don't discriminate in terms of, hey, what's the origin of this app and so on and so forth. For us, is the app or a platform or a service or a product solving a fundamental need in my daily life, right? Is that gap getting addressed for me is all I care about, right? Like I was just listening to a podcast the other day where somebody said that, hey, you look at these quick commerce wars that are happening today, right? At the end of the day, there's only a user preference. There's nothing like loyalty. Right? Let's say I open Blinkit, I don't find what I have. I immediately go to Instamart or Zepto, right? Like there's not, like loyalty today is very, very hard to get, right? But having said that, I think coming back to your question, what makes it very exciting for the Indian market is that one is, of course, it's a very large market, right? Like, and in fact, there was this interesting report that came out earlier in the year on Bloom, which was the Indus Valley report, that says that, look, India is like these three giant buckets, right? And when I say giant buckets, because while the buckets relative to each other may be big or small, but in its entirety, we are pretty bigger than maybe some of the European countries and so on, right? So there's an India one, which is 120 million top tier, greater than 20K USD annual income. And then there is this middle India, which we call as India 2,
India too.
which is about 360 million, right? And then your rest 900 million is India 3, right? Now today, if you look at a lot of these top apps that are trying to kind of delve into, the tier 1 space, quick commerce is one example, or even e-commerce, for example, at least on the premium side is another example, and Uber, Ola, etc. A lot of them have done a fairly decent job of getting into tier 1, penetrating deep, right? Which is your top 6, 8, 10 metros, right?
Correct.
I think in my mind, right, the big opportunity is India 2, right? Which is, of course, not just 3 times the size, but in fact, there's this very interesting thing that a lot of people refer to it as the Bharat, right? That,
yes.
And because people refer to it as Bharat, right, there are some misconceptions that come with it, right? So the first biggest misconception is that Bharat is not Hindi, right?
Yeah, that's
because it is actually vernacular, right? Which means that if you think about the India too, right, or India in general, right, there was this census survey that said only 60% of Indians consume Hindi. 40% don't know Hindi. It is Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Gujarati, Bhojpuri, all the other languages, right? So one is, so coming back to the question, is exciting because you have a very language first market in the India to play, right? Saying that, hey, if I create something which is more not text driven, because then, of course, text creates barriers of, them knowing how to read and write. Generally, it's in the English first and so on, right? How do I create something that's more voice, more audio, and then create that play for India too, right? So the first misconception is Bharat is not Hindi.
Right.
Second misconception is Bharat is not poor, right? Because Bharat is now getting a lot more aspirational, right? So think about this, right? Like if you go to a tier 2, and I'm saying, let's say a Coimbatore, Mysore, so any of these tier 2 cities, right? The aspiration because of internet adoption is very high, even in youngsters there, right? They've seen the brands, they're seeing advertising, they're seeing consuming OTT, they're seeing that kind of, that content. And because of internet getting democratized, 4G, 5G, etc., they know what is available in the market.
Exposure.
Right? Now, what they're looking for is, hey, in my pocket, can I get this? Right? So a fantastic example is Tata Retail has these stores called Zudio. Right?
Correct.
Now, Zudio is doing fantastically well. It's now, I think, 40-50% of their entire overall top line now. So earlier it used to be West Side and some of these other stores. Now it is Zudio. What is Zudio? It's basically tier 2, tier 3 ke liye mass premium, right? Saying that, hey, you can find stuff that you want, affordable, and trust me, these stores are like packed with people, right? So a lot of what's happening now in tier 2 especially is more omni, saying that even if, let's say, think about this, right? A user in tier 2, there is not much traffic, right? It's not like I have to go from my house to Indira Nagar, Whitefield. Yeah. He's saying for an 8-minute drive, do I have to pull out my two-wheeler?
Yeah.
If it's not there in the shop downstairs, can I order on Flipkart? Right. So that's the adoption that we are seeing even in tier 2. The second thing is that if you look at a mass brand like HUL, right, which is like making soaps, shampoos, etc., their last year said that 70% of their sales is now coming from premium products. Okay. Which means that even tier 2, tier 3, the consumption for premium is actually increasing. Right. So the second big misconception in India too is not poor.
Yeah.
They have aspiration, and if they see enough value / cost fit, they will actually buy the product. Right. And I think the third big misconception is that Bharat or what is called as tier 2, tier 3, it's very, very hard to monetize. Again, I would come back to the fact that what's the value and is the user stickiness enough in what you're trying to build? And if there are actually startups that have done a fantastic job even in the monetization line. So there is example of Pocket FM, AstroTalk, and so on and so forth that have penetrated tier 2, tier 3 pretty well. And they're kind of growing that base in a very big manner, right? So kind of summing up, one is, of course, I think the play of diversity in India is very big. In fact, if you start looking at each of these buckets, there is a lot of heterogeneity in it, right? So if you pick a niche, go deep in it, the market is big enough, you can actually build very well for any India that you are catering to, right? So I think that's the exciting part. And of course, with the entire 5G adoption, lower price points of smartphones, etc., internet is getting adopted very fast. With UPI adoption happening, what's enabling it is microtransactions for lower India, right? So, for example, I think the Dream 11 founder said in one of the meetings that, it's very hard for a tier 2 guy to pay me $300 upfront, but he's okay with paying me 10 rupees every day. to transact on Dream11, right? So there is the user need, right? He wants to do this entertainment / quasi gaming thing, but at the same time, he doesn't want to spend 300 on one go. He's okay with doing 10 rupees every day, right? So just like FMCG had this sachet pricing concept, right? That you involve 1 rupee sachets of shampoo. It's the same thing which is coming slowly to the digital world, saying now that UPI is there, can I enable micropayments to ensure adoption?
Lower the barrier of entry.
Correct. Yeah. Right. So that's a very interesting play, is what I feel. But I think all in all, it's an exciting opportunity today to build for India, build in India.
I mean, we have the tech know-how.
Correct.
And we service the entire world. It's not like we can't build great products. And now we have great demand.
Correct.
So it's
marrying the two.
Marrying the two. Fantastic. So I think the next question is, okay, now we can build great apps. We have an insatiably hungry demand, a user base. But this means there is competition. LinkedIn, Insta, Moj, Gmail, all of these apps are fighting for my attention. I mean, that applies to everybody else. So how hard is it to keep users? One of the things which you mentioned, which is apt, that stickiness. How challenging and exciting is it to bring people, number one, and keep them?
Yeah, I think so. So sometimes this is the holy grail, right? Like literally, I mean, there is no shying away from a fact that for any business, right? Like whether it's a product, service business, etc., if you don't have consumer attention, right? And if you are not able to, let's say, have a significant lifetime value from that consumer, it's a very hard business to build and scale, right? Like, I mean, you technically don't have PMF, right? And it's not very easy, right? Because fortunately or unfortunately, we are spiraling towards attention deficit more and more as we proceed, right? Like literally, and I think like we're going from long form to short form to super short form, etc. Because attention spans are going down, right? Like nobody wants to wait so much. Like quick commerce, right, is a classic example. Again, people don't want to wait, right? And the same is true with our attention. And today what's happened is that there is, I would call to an extent, oversaturation of, you can say, exposure of advertisement across all channels, be it offline, digital especially so, but even offline, online, there is a lot of exposure, right? Like think about it, right? Like when you turn around and open your phone, especially whether it's YouTube, whether it's Gmail, whether it's any other social media that you're using, there is so much of exposure that you are, there's so much of ad exposure that's happening that in some sense it becomes like a blind spot for a user, right? Now for a brand that's trying to build engagement, right? I think there are 2-3 basic tenets that you need to keep in mind, right? So one is, how am I being relevant for that consumer at that point in time?
Yes.
Right. So, and the good thing is, see, digital also has its benefits. So while there is oversaturation, and see, the downside of this saturation thing on digital is that today everybody can do digital.
Correct.
Right. So earlier, back in the day when it was only an offline marketing play, only if you have big dollars to spend, only then you would do marketing, which was restricted to a few big FMCG, some tech, etc. Right. Today, even if I have a small budget, I can open an ad manager and like I can configure ads and run it, right? So how do I be relevant when the whole world is advertising, right? So that's the holy grail, right? So the number one is with the data that is available on digital, and this is the positive of being on digital, right? Today you have plethora of signals to say that, hey, is there intent? Where in the funnel is my consumer, right? And of course, every product or service has different life stage in terms of awareness, consideration, when the purchase happens. But at least you can, if not get real data, but at least proxy data to say that where in the funnel could the person be? And more importantly, how do you not just do a blanket communication, creative rendition on any platform, but how do you make it customized for that person?
Yes.
So personalization, but be relevance for their stage in the life cycle, right? Saying that, okay, if he is at the conversion stage, what would nudge him or her to convert, right? And many times it's not purely discounting alone, right? It could be something else. Maybe that person is evaluating you versus some other choice which is not in your category also. Sometimes that also happens, right? Like, so how do you ensure that person converts, or how do you ensure that person is, okay, he's trying to get information, how do I as a brand give him information, awareness about the category, and then do the subtle nudge around what your brand stands for, right? So it's important to be very relevant, very personalized. And I think what's getting increasingly important is how do you be different? So the differentiation in your communication needs to be out there, right? And it stems from the factors from who you are as a brand, right? Like you just can't be different for the sake of being different for a particular channel, right?
Correct.
Like I think a fantastic example, and I generally follow the marketing trends in a bit more nuance, right? Is that I think Zomato did this entire ad on their birthday, right? Which was they came out with an ad saying, and it was like a political ad, right? But it's very true to the grain of what Zomato does, which is like out of the box marketing and being very quirky, and at the same time trying to tell the consumer, hey, we are there, building relevance. And then of course there was a discount that they offered on Zomato Gold and so on. That was also, so they're trying to drive everything in the funnel, right? But I think had let's say a more serious brand done that, obviously it wouldn't have rubbed off, right? So one is try and identify who you are as a brand, right? Like what is your core value prop? And in the grain of that, are you touching consumers, life stage in the right and relevant manner? Correct. While staying true to, what your brand ethos and brand philosophy stands for. So I think that's one way to kind of stand out in this attention deficit,
Correct.
World that we live in. But yeah, I mean, I think more importantly, it's important as marketers to keep trying.
Right.
See, because I don't think any marketer worth their salt will say, hey, I have all the answers, right? Like, I think marketing today as a profession has become a lot more about taking that risk, trying out, even if the budgets are small. The point is you have the appetite to try because you never know what sticks, right? That's the reality. Yeah, experiment, keep iterating, and importantly, keep learning from what you're trying to do, right? Because that's what will fuel your next experiment, perhaps. Right?
And also, even platforms have the responsibility of putting the user first while bringing in brands and ads and everything, making sure that it is relevant and contextual. Because personally speaking, I subscribe to YouTube Premium. I don't like watching ads on YouTube. But my appetite of consuming ads on Insta is different because it helps me discover interesting products. And maybe because it is more transactional where I can buy within Insta. But most of the time, I don't know how many people do this. When you save stuff, it just goes and lives in one universe. But I have this OCD of categorizing it.
Yeah.
If I discover a new place, I save it as a place.
Correct.
And products, they live in a separate category and stuff like that. So it gives me more control to organize what I consume. Be it organic, be it advertorially.
Correct.
I think our appetite is also changing. If it is contextual, if it makes sense to me, the user, I think we don't shy away from balancing organic versus this.
Yeah. And that brings me to an interesting point, right? Like many times marketing is not just about the cost behind your campaign.
Right.
It's so much about, are you relevant for that user at that point in time? Like it need not even be an expensive campaign for it to work, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think one of the chicken and eggs, at least in the consumer side, is how much do I park on branding versus how much do I park on performance, right? Because like that's a debate always, right? Saying, hey, I want to hit my monthly KPIs, and so I need to index on performance. So I cut down on brand, but at the same time, the question is brand spending relevant? Should I do it? And so on and so forth. So that's always like the fine balance that a marketer has to draw, because he has to meet his growth/acquisition objectives and at the same time build brand for long term, because if he is not doing that, then all of this of small short-term spending is wasted, right? So that is the second, predicament.
A case of now and later.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think we spoke about fighting for user attention and bringing people on these products. Actually, before we switch the lights, the cameras, and the mics on, we were talking about this act of balancing growth and profit. Like how just a few years ago, just 5 years ago, if you look pre-pandemic, things were very different when it comes to popular apps like OTTs and stuff like that. Customer acquisition probably was the modus operandi, and now things have changed very quickly. So today, with wearing your growth leader hat, how do these products balance growth as well as driving profit?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the previous question, it might sound rhetorical. It's a very long-winded answer, but it's a tough question to answer.
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, it's extremely hard, right? Like, it's extremely hard because I think both sides are equally important, right? Like, you have to be profitable and you have to grow the business, right? Like, that's what you're in the market for, right? And in fact, I'll give you a very interesting example of a big platform, right? So, Facebook has about 550 million monthly actives in India.
Okay.
They have about 200 million monthly actives in the US, right? Their top line from the US is roughly about, I think, 10 or 12 times of what they get from India, right? Now, interestingly, the reason I'm saying this is because if you think of a market like India, right, it's extremely hard to get profitability right away, at least on the consumer side, right? Because your ARPUs from a consumer are very low. Right? I'll give you another interesting example, right? Like, I was in Disney Hotstar. We used to have these earning calls happening every quarter from the Disney global team, right? And they used to kind of benchmark the Disney Plus, which is your US OTT app, with of course Disney Plus Hotstar, which is largely India, right, and a few other Southeast Asian. It's almost 12 times the ARPU that you get in the US and Europe versus what you get in India, right? The reason I'm contrasting that is because in markets like which are more mature, well developed, right? If you're able to, one is of course you're able to build larger CM1, CM2, you're able to build contribution margin very quickly and hence hit profitability. And then the question is about scale. In India, you need to balance the two together because it's a large market, right? Yeah, you need to get deep enough growth, penetration, etc., etc. And at the same time, if you are grossly negative, right, then every user you are acquiring is actually hitting your bottom line even worse, right? So I think the way I look at it is that there needs to be a path or a runway to how you're going to get to profitability. If not now, at least in the next 6 months, 8 months, whatever timeline that you choose as a category, as a company, as a brand, right? Because a lot of things in India today are still being tried, experimented, etc. Right? A classic case is quick commerce, right? Nobody is profitable yet, right? And maybe quick commerce is more here and now. Let's go back maybe in the 90s when Amazon listed in the 90s in the US. It wasn't profitable. It wasn't profitable for 15 years after listing also. But it gave the story to investors that, hey, we are growing, right? As long as we are growing, and of course today I think things are different, etc. But the point is, making your expectations very clear, saying that, hey, we are going to be bleeding for next X number of quarters, years, whatever it is. This is what we are planning to do. These are the metrics with which you measure us for now. And then when are we going to kind of see scale, retention, etc., which is going to drive profitability. So because if not today, any business needs to hit a profitability at some timeline, some horizon, right?
Right.
If that's not truly defined, then it's a bad place to be, right? Because then you're just burning the money without necessarily knowing at what time will I tip the scales.
Correct.
Right? Like you would see that in the food tech place, right? Like Zomato is listed, so he's going for an IPO maybe next year. Now you see a platform charge that's levied on both these platforms, right? Now, all of this is an attempt to get unit economics positive, right? Because maybe they are minus 20 rupees, minus 30 rupees per order. With every rupee that they are shaving off, they are coming closer to profitability.
Correct.
So it's a fine balance, right? Like in an India context, you can't just say ki I'll be profitable for day one in consumer business. It's very hard, depending on category, of course. But how do you balance the two with a clear line of sight saying by this X quarter, this X date, these are the fundamental shifts in my either cost structures or revenue structures that will hit profitability.
Correct.
So that's
absolutely, I think well said. I think talking about profits is obviously like we spoke about how Disney Hotstar makes revenue, subscription versus AVOD. And also it is fair enough to say that we have the appetite to pay for stuff. But the next question is, there is no loyalty. If it is a commoditized service or a product, zero loyalty, but it becomes a matter of convenience or price sensitivity, etc. So while chasing, ensuring profit, monetization is a very key part, especially for products which don't generate subscription revenue. Now, monetization is obviously you have to keenly look at your users and understand what kind of content or products is being consumed, and then you bring influencers and brands and products and stuff like that, your partner ecosystem. So, what is the challenge there or opportunity in terms of looking at users? Okay, yes, you are our main focus. We'll make sure that your experience doesn't get tainted. At the same time, we would love you to discover new stuff, which might mean we'll bring a few partners on. But what is your take on?
Yeah. So, I mean, for any content platform, right, be it OTT, social media like ShareChat, etc., I think there is a balance because you're serving the content there and you're serving ads there, right? So there is a balance between your user experience, consuming the content, etc., as well as your, your monetization levers, which could be your ad spaces, your influencers doing either what they want, like from a UGC perspective, which what the most people enjoy, right, or them doing, let's say, brand call outs, shout outs, etc., which is the monetization leg of it, right? It's always a fine balance between the two. In fact, all the OTTs, even ad platforms, etc., run a lot of ad regressions to see that what is the perfect balance between how many ads, how many ad units in a social feed versus how much organic content, so that people don't drop off and so on and so forth, right? The challenge is very real, right? Because it's not that, even if you look at like YouTube, right? Like till a while back, if you don't have the premium subscription, you typically used to see one ad before you start. Now there are 3 ads, right? Like that gives you a feeling that, hey, how many more ads am I going to be served before I actually start watching my content, right? Like, and hence, the nudge towards saying, okay, if you really don't like it, go premium, go buy premium, right? I think even globally, right? Like even I think Netflix tested this, tried it very hard. Like it's a very hard market to crack subscription globally as well, at least in the OTT play, right? Because if you want to build formidable revenue lines, in my mind, it has to be a hybrid. You have to build subscription, you have to build ads, and both of them need to lead you towards top line / profitability growth, etc. Right? Like it's in my mind, it's never an either or. It has to, at least from an India context, it has to be an and. And I say India context because your subscription revenues are going to be a much smaller ticket size compared to the West, right? So let's say like Jio came out with whatever 30 rupees of subscription.
Right.
I'm sure while they want the user behavior to get tuned towards paying for content, that's their objective. It's not that, hey, out of this 30 rupees, I'll be making a lot of money.
Correct.
Probably, yeah, of course, with the volume game, they'll want to do that. Yeah. But it's also to get a user to start paying for their content, because so far everything for Jio has been free. Whether it's cricket, whether it's even entertainment content, they are now slowly saying that, hey, you now need to start paying if you want to watch good quality, premium content, etc. Right? So I feel that monetization strategy has to be tied in to what your market conditions are operating with, right? In fact, I think the other piece that I would probably think about is that you have to test your monetization strategy very early, right? And I think there are some classic examples here. Like I think one is, of course, Pocket FM is a very good example, right? They launched their first episode. It's audio only, right? So correct. They launched their first episode. They keep you on the hook, right? Saying that, hey, if you want to unlock the next episode, then you have to pay the subscription fee. And ticket sizes are kept low, right? Because they're catering to also the slightly more tier 2, tier 3 audience, which is consuming, let's say, the audio content and so on. So that they're able to get some monetization, some subscription revenue coming in. And at the same time, they have left them at a cliffhanger, right? So people want to actually pay, come back, watch, etc., right? Even if you look at OTT space, right, a lot of content that you really want to watch, let's say Succession or some of this content, is always generally behind paywall, right?
Right, correct. Absolutely.
Reason is also this, right? Saying that, hey, if you have the appetite to pay to watch this content, why don't you, go ahead and pay? But that also gives another lever saying that in India as a market, can we have a third approach? And I think Amazon Prime Video tried that, saying, can we do transaction video on demand? To say that, hey, I want to watch only Succession.
Correct.
I don't want to watch the rest of the things. Can you give me at a mid price, right? Saying that I don't want to pay a full subscription pack. Right. Okay, I'm not going to not pay as well, but can I transact on your platform, buy only this movie for a certain cost? So the larger point I'm trying to make is you need to be experimental with your monetization strategy, right? Like there is no, because this worked in West, it works here. Absolutely. You need to keep trying out, hey, what is the user willing to pay for? And a lot of that is testing, right? Like it comes back to that do you have the appetite to test whether your monetization strategy works or not? And of course, it takes time for markets to mature also, especially like.
I mean, one beautiful case, personal experience is fan code.
Yeah.
When there is so much sports and so much live events you can subscribe to. Of course, there is one single price. You get everything which is available on fan code and you can watch everything. But my case was I just want to watch English Championship, the second tier of English football, and nothing else. I don't want to watch everything else. So that pocket pricing of what, $99 or something for the entire season, or 100 rupees or whatever the price was. I mean, it's fantastic.
Correct. Yeah.
It's brilliant.
See, I mean, exactly that, right? Like you probably won't have wanted to pay 500-600 for the entire pack.
Absolutely.
But you're willing to pay the $100.
Yes.
And see, the insight here is also saying that, do I have a strong enough cohort of such users?
Yes.
Right? Like who are willing to do that transaction pricing? Because see, at the end of the day, a lot of this, even from a back-end perspective, is cost of maintaining all of this. Right?
Correct.
Because you can't have like 1,000 monetization levers and say that everything will give you money, right? Because there is an operation at the back end, there is like proper architecture for all of this that's getting built.
Yeah.
So you have to take your conscious bets to say that, hey, I'm testing this. If it reaches this scale, then maybe I will go ahead and make it a full-fledged. Like, I think a fantastic example is Meesho is now trying to monetize a lot of, the content influencers that they have. Because Meesho is also trying to build a perception quality in tier 2, tier 3, saying that,
Right.
am I good quality for the users that I'm engaging with? And at the same time, they've also found, and very similar observation we have in ShareChat is that as you go tier 2, tier 3, people are far more attracted to influencers than necessarily celebrity saying something, right? So how do you build a social commerce layer through the influencers that you're trying to sell from, right? So for example, now influencers have moved from a pure brand marketing play saying, hey, I'm doing a brand shout out, to a bottom funnel saying that, hey, you get paid only if you're able to sell 10 of these for me, right? So even the performance angle has kicked into an influencer play, which was purely a brand and content play earlier. So now it's become more bottom funnel with these. So it's a different monetization lever again, but very interesting play that's happening.
That's at the end of the day, experimentation and figuring out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
When it comes to monetization, I think you touched on two very important terms: operations and the architecture, or another way of saying technology. To sustain and grow any business, especially even in the B2C sense, digital products, if monetization is very, very important to maintain growth and profit, so are people and technology to drive operations, be it sales, marketing, business development, to technology, whatever it is. So according to you, how do you balance people and technology? Let's say in growth.
Yeah, I mean, see, fundamentally, the way at least any business is looked at, right, is that one is, of course, I think any business is done by people, right, within people, right? So even if it's our consumer, it's a person consuming the app. If it's a B2B product, it's some buyer who's also a person, etc., etc. So fundamentally, your product or servicing has to appeal to a person, right? So that people element is very important, not just external, but even internal, right? So there are people working in your teams, people at the back end, and so on and so forth, right? Technology is a layer, the way I look at it, is a layer that connects all of this in a very seamless manner, as seamless as possible, right? And the way I think of it is that it is hugely, hugely important, because in a country like India, if you're trying to look at scale and adoption, or our product reaching, if it's product or service reaching to the last mile digitally, then technology becomes that layer that enables you to do this in a very seamless manner, right? Like, simple example is that, look, you're watching live cricket match, the India finals with South Africa, 5.3 crore concurrent viewers, right? Like, you're handling, so your tech and your backend is actually giving you that scale, that support to kind of do concurrent viewership for so many 5.3 crore Indians to watch this simultaneously at one point in time, right? So extremely important. Like, think about it, right? It's the last over decided the game. And if the last over had the tech failed, then everybody would have come out cursing Disney Hotstar, saying, guys, you kind of, screwed up. So it's a lot of responsibility, especially when you're doing something like that, right? Saying that, how do I ensure that it's not just about, can I scale, but do I have backups? Can I ensure that I don't fail at the right times itself, right? Do I have maintenance? So all of these layers are extremely, extremely important to ensure that your business can scale, business can grow, and in some sense, it also creates a lot of user stickiness, right? Because think about it, right? As a consumer, if you fire the app and the app keep crashing, then you don't want to keep that app, right? Unless, like, if you can do away with the app and instead find a substitute, then in a sense you are inviting competition, right? Like, so this entire piece has now become table stakes, right? At least from a consumer facing app perspective, because people have grown so used to firing the app in 3 clicks, things happen. Like today, it's table stakes that, hey, whatever I want, whether it's content, whether it's grocery, whether it's e-commerce shopping, in 2-3 clicks, my entire journey should be done. That's the baseline expectation. And what people probably sometimes underappreciate is that there's a lot of back-end work, right? From tech, systems, processes, people to kind of build this, right? So in my mind, it goes hand in hand, right? Like it both need to happen together, right? Like for example, I'm sure Hotstar could not have built that scale for 5.3 crore Indians 3 years back. It would have been, of course, a waste of resource, more, so on and so forth. But slowly they built it, right? With every IPL, concurrency was going up, the stacks got built, so on and so forth. And even ad layers that got added into the stack had to be updated, upgraded, etc. Right. The second thing is that as you're looking at new age consumer apps, right, your tech product teams become super important to even build new features, right? Because a lot of consumer discovery happens saying that what is consumer asking for, or where can we place monetization, for example. And then you go back to the drawing board with product, tech, see how do you add that in your entire current architecture and stack, right? So to give you a simple example, right, I think in ShareChat, one of the biggest features is that people actually download content and share it on WhatsApp, right? So like, let's say you and me may not have the app, but I promise you, if you open your WhatsApp and search for any of your groups, a lot of your content, either video or display, would have been originating from ShareChat. So one of the big use cases is that people download content and then share it on WhatsApp. So that's why even the name ShareChat, right? Because it's shareability. So we realized that, hey, this is such a powerful tool because every day there's so many million users sharing content in their social circle, friends and so on, that we now put a monetization layer on it. Saying that, okay, if the brand is, say, Tata Tea, and they're launching a new variant of, say, Tetley or whatever, every good morning messages that get downloaded from the platform can have a small banner of open your day with a Tetley.
So it gets stitched into
gets stitched into. Now, of course, that came with, so what I'm trying to say is that this new feature getting built, testing it out, scaling, so on and so forth, came after a lot of user testing to say that, hey, this is such a big opportunity for us. But then if you're like, of course, it's your tech, product, systems, etc., that I also have to hold up to ensure that, this goes on with your messaging that you're anyway communicating, right? So, and the best part was, right, like the product tech team didn't just do it for a display. Let's say you have a video creative, it can run as a pre-roll or a post-roll to your WhatsApp video communication also. So if, let's say, Tata Tetley has a 6-seconder, because it's a short form app, right? 6-seconder communication about the tea, it can go as a post-roll to the actual video that the person is sharing in his friends group or whatever, right? And think about the power, right? Because it's not that a business WhatsApp message is sending you something. It's your own friend circle, relatives network of WhatsApp group that is forwarding this content to you, and then you are consuming it, right? So it just creates a different kind of stickiness, right? Absolutely. But larger point is, for anything new that comes in, right, you need, of course, that support, that layering of tech product involvement to say that, hey, it's not only viable, it's scalable, and we can, as scale grows, we can actually continue to build on this, right? That's how I look at it. Like both go hand in hand in both.
Super apt. Fantastically said. So let me put you on a spot and say, if we peel the curtains of, if we put product and tech aside for new age apps and we look at operations, for example, if we chase unit economics and profitability, somewhere companies have to become more efficient, which means they have to look at their processes and say, how can we improve them or how can we automate them? Which would mean the question would eventually be, okay, automation, technology versus people. Which set of problems should I throw people at? Which set of problems should I throw technology alone at? And which set of problems require both? So in that sense, from a purely operational sense, the balancing act of people versus tech I mean, there's no straightforward answer, obviously, because every business is different and so forth. But eventually, if we are chasing efficiency, we have to balance that.
Correct. No, in fact, I think the conundrum for every, I think, both, I would say, early stage, late stage, even for some of the MNCs today, right? Saying, ki, if I have to drive efficiency in my processes and even overlaying the fact that, hey, can I automate some of this through AI and so on and so forth? Do I need so many people to kind of run this operations in a streamlined manner, right? And the way I look at it is that, look, I think there are two ways to look at it, right? There's a short term, medium term, long term kind of a roadmap, right? In the short term, I don't think things change so dramatically unless you are on a survival mode, right? If the company is at that stage, then it's a little different.
Correct.
But in short term, it's slightly more incremental gains that companies are looking for, saying that, hey, can I reduce SLA from say 8 to 6 to 4?
Correct.
And what is the people improvement in that? What's my efficiency coming out of process, AI, whatever else, right? But I think in the medium to long term, every company, every business would want to go towards automating, driving efficiency, having more process control, less people dependence, etc. So that the end consumer has a more seamless experience. Because any business starts with the end consumer first, saying that he has to have the right and best experience, and then work backward to say, okay, and hence what should be the process? And hence can the process be completely automated, or does it need manual intervention? And in fact, there are some use cases where certain processes work best when done with manual intervention. Now, of course, Gen AI is trying to change a lot of that as well. But currently, from an enterprise point of view, is it scalable? Is it tested? Do we have a lot of hallucinations in the algorithm? It is there, right? So a lot of that probably gets moderated and stuff like that. But it'll happen soon, right? It'll happen sooner than later. The idea is, and this is how I think of it, is it's not that the people will be made redundant. It's that the people will have to do a very different quality / stage of work than what they're doing today. Maybe they're doing something that can be easily automated, whereas maybe they need to be adding more value slightly higher up in the chain, right? So how is an organization, a brand thinking about that? Saying that, okay, probably maybe not now, but maybe 6 months down the line, this will have a phase 1, phase 2 of implementation.
Correct.
And I'll be at this stage where I don't need, say, 10 people to do this. I only need 3 or 4. Is there a way in which the other 6 can add value to this end of the process, right? And sometimes it does become a hard call, saying that, hey, I don't need 6. Then it's only 4, and then where do you go from there, right? But at least if I were in the employee shoes, I would think that, hey, what is the other value that I can add to the overall process for the system? Because at the end of the day, the business will always optimize for profit / the end consumer experience. And every employee needs to ask themselves, what is the value I'm adding for both of them?
Correct.
If I am not, then even if it's not today, but 1 year down the line, I have a chance of being, replaced. And this is across levels, across functions, across anything, right? I need to be adding value either to the end consumer or to my profitability metrics. If I'm not doing either, irrespective of what you're doing, you're not adding value, right? Like that's the hard truth.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, this points to the fact that while the ultimate decision will be taken by the organization, if it is people on tech or people plus tech, this also puts a gauntlet with employees, with the people to look at technology and say, I have to upskill.
Yeah.
I have to be very mindful of how you said, how can I contribute to the bottom line, at least closer to it.
Yeah.
So that, and what skills do I have to pick up if I have to become that? Because if it gets obsolete, what I'm doing right now, then I better drive more value and pick up skills which are absolutely necessary. So when it comes to this, in your own org, what do you look for people when you hire?
Yeah. So, and I think over the last multiple organizations that I've worked with, right, I think while of course I think I'll just keep the skills part aside because every job has a requirement on skills. But I think the 2-3 things that I look for at least is, one is curiosity, right? Intellectual curiosity. Now, what I mean by that is, many a times when you come onto a project, you come onto a team, etc., there is a 95% chance that we don't know the end stage of this product, of the project, right? Like we know that these are our milestones, or this is what we vision, this is our vision, this is what our objectives are, etc. But a lot of the hows and what the end stage is going to be is nebulous, right? Like, and that's where is the person intellectually curious enough to ask us a lot of questions, right? Saying that and test hypothesis early, right? See, only when you're curious, right, you are not just following what's given in the playbook, right? Because that's pure execution, right? You have the ability to think about what is written, question that, and then see is there a better way to do it, keeping your end objectives, your vision, etc. in mind, right? So I think the most fundamental thing we look for is how is the person in terms of his curiosity, what are the types and kinds of questions, and what is the depth that person goes into when in whatever that person has worked with, right? Like that's very important because it shows what is the level of thinking, right? See, because typically, let's say there is something to be implemented, the immediate outcome of that is typically very obvious, but the second order, third order effects have to be thought through, right? So is that person curious enough, thinking enough to say that, okay, this can happen. Okay, this is something that I have experienced in this place, etc., etc. So a lot of those, I would say, strides is what we kind of look at, saying is that person intellectual, asking questions, curious, right? Because I think that's also a very innate thing, right? Like it's not necessarily across the board, everybody has that, right? There are some people who are very curious, will strike conversations, ask you questions, etc., right? So that's, I think, a great thing, right? Like, and even if I were to dissociate with personality types, right? You could be a non-extrovert, you could be an introvert, correct? But at the same time, you could satiate your curiosity by reading, by going through blogs, listening to stuff, etc., etc. So it's not about pure personality type. It's about, are you intellectually curious? And how are you solving for that curiosity? It can be even in your personal life, right? So that's, I think, one fundamental bedrock that we kind of look at. Of course, I think other than that, largely the other piece is largely around team dynamics. How's that person, because like we were discussing, right? Everything is a people transaction, right? Whether it's internal, external, client facing, internal facing. Nothing today, even if you're an IC role, right? There is hardly anything you would do without stakeholders involved, right? So if you can't work with people, it's very hard for you to build, deliver, even if you're doing something in isolation, right? So you need to have at least a team playing ability, right? To say that, hey, if I need help, am I able to reach out, or am I, going down in my own spiral, right? Because especially if you look at lean structures, tighter organizations, right? Today, the managers in such places don't have, let's say, unlimited bandwidth to go and solve your problems, right? So one of the charms / downsides of startups is that you are also given a lot of independence, but at the same time, you have to figure things out quickly and move ahead, right? Like you don't have unlimited bandwidth of time, right? So if you are stuck, like, can you proactively go to 10 people, figure out the solution, rather than, always waiting for, hey, my manager will check in with me, and that time I will tell him or her that, hey, this is the issue. So I think those are some of the softer aspects that one kind of looks at, saying, can this person, even if not now, maybe in few months, independently drive things himself or herself? I think that's also an important trait to have.
The mindset drives pretty much everything, yeah. So you spoke about people. On the tech side, obviously, there's some tech you'll have to build if it needs be, or most tech can be bought to drive your operations and stuff like that. How does this decision of assessing technologies happen at large enterprise consumer-facing businesses, which you have experience with? The balance buying, building, do they need tech, etc.?
Yeah. No, I think that's a very important one, right? Because like we just discussed, right? Like I think tech and all of this is very fundamental to some of these businesses, right? Like especially in terms of sustenance, growth, keeping the lights on, etc., right? I think at least in most organizations that I have worked with or come across, right? I think the build or buy decision is generally in, I would say, 70-80% cases is dependent on, is this core to me as an organization or not, right? So for example, if this is core to what I am doing and delivering value to to my end consumer, then in many cases, if I have the wherewithal, bandwidth, the people, etc., to build it, I would rather build it.
Correct.
Because if it's core to me, it will help me in 2-3 ways. One is it will give me insighting about the process itself, saying how is my client consumer interacting with my platform, etc., etc. Are there tweaks that I need to make in my core process or whatever I'm building? So those are fundamental insights which helps you not only understand the consumer and client better, but also to improve your product and proposition, right? So I think those largely are generally built because they're core to your business, core to your P&L, core to your consumer and client. Anything that supports these layers, right? Could be things like payment collection, invoices, things like that, right? Unless invoicing is your core business, then it's different, right? But if it is a support to this business, then generally people tend to, kind of either outsource it, buy it, whatever it is, right? So that's generally the framework that people look at it with. Of course, like there are multiple exceptions you could have to this, saying that you could also outsource the core, or you could also build non-core things internally if it's at low cost, low dev effort, etc., etc. Or it could be also that, hey, in the long term, the vision of the company is to integrate forward and backward.
Right.
So maybe I build this now with a vision that in future I might just kind of build something in the adjacent space, right? So it depends largely on what stage the company is at. What have they already built, right? Like what have they built? What are they already building? And typically, at least on most of the bigger listed companies, they would have an annual report, a quarterly, that talks about their vision and growth, right? So if you are an enterprise trying to figure out, hey, these guys will build it or will they buy from me? Then I think that's the best way is, of course, to ask them, right? Because that's like the no-brainer, saying,
correct,
hey, what's in your vision?
Yes.
Are you trying to build this? Can we help somewhere, etc.? But more importantly, if let's say you don't have access for whatever reason, right? Then a lot of these, at least quarterly reports or earnings calls, will tell you at least what they're thinking, right? What is their top leadership trying to solve for in the next 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 1 year, right? That will give you an indication what are they more likely to build / what are they more likely to outsource. So that can also help you as an enterprise to gauge that, hey, maybe this is the right space to build. And of course, I think the proof of the pudding is, will they pay for it, right? Like I think that's like it's not just a ask that they have, which is nice and fancy, but are they willing to pay for a prototype, pay for some kind of a, because see, if there is enough pain in the process and it's not core to them, right? Then you really have a shot at making something or building something.
Correct.
That's how I think.
I mean, a classic case example is what you're talking about. If it is something core to my business, then probably I might build it. For example, if Netflix wants to build a recommendation engine, it makes sense to build a recommendation engine.
Yeah.
If they want to aggregate a payment gateway, there's no point in building a payment gateway. You just integrate something like Razorpay and you just move along, right?
Yeah.
And also, is it fair to say that sometimes you might look at a third-party app and say it sort of solves what we want to solve and integrate it, and over a period of time you learn and you learn through the app and build on your own, instead of just waiting for a long life cycle of building and testing and figuring out and putting it into proper use. Might as well bring something in, learn, and eventually build something much more robust and much more contextual to you. Does that happen?
Yeah, it does. In fact, interestingly, right? Like, I think so. Flipkart acquired ClearTrip, right? This happened a while back because Flipkart was also looking at. Look at most of big e-commerce players globally also, right? They are now building a lot of adjacent businesses, right? Like e-commerce, of course, is like one core thing, but they're building payments. So Amazon has Amazon Pay, Flipkart has launched its UPI. Then they're building travel in some shape and form. They're building quick commerce in some shape and form.
Because Zomato are they still in talks with Paytm's movie ticketing?
Yeah, they bought out.
They did.
They did. So so Zomato had a business called Zomato Live, which was around events and all of that stuff.
Yes.
And now they bought out the Paytm business of, that. Yeah. So I think a lot of businesses actually openly evaluate adjacencies, right? Saying that, hey, maybe I am myself hitting some kind of a ceiling in terms of trying to build this myself with my current understanding of users / probably it could be even backend capabilities and so on and so forth. And at that point in time, is there maybe another player who's trying to build something in that space, and what are the benefits that can come out of it? Right. But yeah, again, I think the holy grail is when the two merge, or at least when there is a when one buys out the other or so on, right? Like, is there a real you can say marriage of the two in terms of everything else as well, right? Not just in terms of the frontline business, but in terms of, is the consumer finding enough value in both of them? Is the backend teams in sync with each other when they're trying to see? Because at some stage, if at all you would want to integrate, then are the two, kind of shaking hands, working seamlessly, right? I'll give you a very, very interesting example, right? Like, think of quick commerce, right? Swiggy was actually the first one to start Instamart, right? Like, back in COVID, I think just between COVID, etc., they were the first one to start quick commerce, and like grocery in 20 minutes, 30 minutes they were the first ones to do it, right? And think of what Zomato did, right? They went and acquired Blinkit, and today Blinkit has a 50% market share, right? So it's not always that if I build, and think about synergy also, right? Like, Swiggy actually had the Instamart on their app, right? So Zomato and Blinkit are like two different apps, right? Like, they're like, the normal regular hypothesis would be, hey, more discovery, easy to adopt, Instamart will kill it, and so on and so forth, right? Not the case, right? Like, Blinkit has a 50% market share, and they seem to be doing things right. Like, the point is that, like, even if you do an acquisition, right? Like, how is it working out from an end consumer point of view? Are you adding enough value to your end consumer? And at the same time, is it building into your overall business thesis, business portfolio, etc., right? Because think about it, right? Like, how many things can you see on a Swiggy app today? You see Genie, you see Instamart, you see food, etc., etc. Maybe the user behavior is one click and I want food.
Correct.
And I don't want to be distracted, right? Maybe that's the user behavior, right? So you need to keep constantly thinking, saying what works best, right? Like, and honestly, there are no right answers, right? You have to, it's a little bit of luck also involved, but at the same time, the appetite to keep testing and trying out what's working and what's not working is super important.
Right. We spoke about growth and strategies and this absolute willingness to experiment. Some things we pick up through our experiences over our career, and there are other ways of understanding what is happening in terms of innovation, what is happening in the market, strategically, etc., through consuming content. So how do you stay updated in your line of business about what's happening, let's say, in your current industry, or how did you do in your previous industry? How do you stay up to date about the industry and the market itself?
Yeah, I think it's super relevant, right? And as we are going in that, so we were talking about the entire oversaturation of digital and advertisement, etc. There is oversaturation of content also, right? Like, usually, like back in the day when you could only consume, say, newspaper and all of that. Now with internet proliferation and everything, you have like multiple channels, multiple things. So today, availability of information is not a challenge, right? Like any marketer, whatever stage, right, budding or very seasoned marketer has availability of information. There is plethora of content, right? The question is what you choose, right? Like, the question is and this has a little bit to do even with what are you personally passionate about, interested in, etc., right? Like, so for me, I think I'm super passionate about generally reading up on startups, the internet ecosystem, consumer tech in particular, marketplaces, new business model, etc. And I generally gravitate towards either, let's say, online blogs or industry publications, podcasts, etc. that generally talk about, an intersection of business growth, business models in these spaces, right? Consumer tech, marketplace. So that's where I kind of consume a lot of content. Also, it's very important to consume, I would say, contrarian content to what you think, right? Because I think one of the biggest thing is that we're all in our bubbles, right? Saying that, and a lot of social media feeds that, right?
Yeah,
saying, okay, if you want, let's say, if you watch Justin Bieber, you'll get like too much of that genre, right? Yeah. Now the point is, how do you think different, right? And a lot of that can also be conscious choices in terms of publications you pick up, in terms of the nature of people whom you're trying to follow or the kind of content they have. Not because necessarily you have to agree with their viewpoint, but just to kind of think from a different perspective, right? And there's so many examples where your thought process might be completely off, and there could be a very different reason why the other thought process is actually right. But it's important to take that perspective so that you are able to think through situations from very different angles, right?
Right.
So that's what I try and do. Try to keep a very, I would say, diverse range of genre / people I follow / kind of content I consume, so that it also helps me to take a different point of view towards the same situation, and kind of see it holistically rather than just from my
Absolutely.
point of view.
Beautifully put. Any favorite personalities, publications, podcasts you want to, or you really love and you keep going back to again and again, if you have to name?
So I actually follow a bunch of, so thanks to Bangalore traffic, I actually consume a lot of Bangalore podcasts. So, because I mean, when you're driving, you have like, you literally have your ears to lend, right? So, so I actually am a very, I would say, avid podcast listener, right? So in podcasts, I actually, so there is this interesting podcast by the Ken. There is one, of course, I think that comes out daily. Then they have a new one. So there was another one called First Principles.
Last Principles, I think.
Yeah. Then I also consume this podcast by the Farnham Street. The Knowledge Project. I think that's a very good one. Goes very deep in some of these topics.
It's the same guy who did the metal models, right?
The same guy, Shane Parrish. So,
Shane Parrish, absolutely.
Yeah. So his podcast is brilliant. Then there's a podcast by Morgan Housel. So that's also a very nice one.
Absolutely. It's extremely short episode, but very deep and
very deep.
thought-provoking.
And so I had read his book. I was really intrigued by the book, and then his podcasts are also very short, very unusual, right? They're a monologue actually. It's just his thoughts that he talks about, but very deep in terms of at least understanding behaviors, right? So because a lot of these content is not necessarily about marketing, as you would understand, right? It's about understanding human behaviors.
Beautifully.
And I think that's more fundamental to a marketer than just necessarily understanding business and so on, right? So yeah, I mean, that's something that I consume. Then there's another podcast by this Reid Hoffman. It's called The Masters of Scale.
Yes.
That gives you a very different perspective about what's happening in slightly more Silicon Valley US businesses. Because invariably you would see similar kind of business model coming here after a while. Or for example, like I was just listening to the recent episode, and he's comparing the movie industry in the US and how it's not actually doing very well. And if you look at Indian market, right, the first 6 months, other than maybe I think Kalki, which released now, and Manjumal Boys, all other releases in the first 6 months in India have been very lackluster. So, and very ironically, right, same thing is playing out in the US, right? Like the first 6 months, hardly any big release. In fact, if you think about last year, there was Barbie, Oppenheimer, etc., and there were pretty big movies that came out. And now, in the first 6 months of 2024, hardly any big rock solid Hollywood movie that has come out, right? So kind of interesting to see that same cycles playing out, and reasons are very different, by the way, right? Like obviously, so but yeah, I mean, it gives you a very different perspective on some industries that I am interested in. So yeah, I dabble into a lot of.
Do you read anything for his podcast?
Generally, no. So when I travel, I generally read, because that airplane that 2 hours travel gives you uninterrupted reading time. So yeah, I'm generally reading around. So I've picked up this interesting book by a guy called Dr. Peter Attia.
Okay.
He's an interesting guy. He's basically a medical doctor by profession, and now he's quit that. So he was, I think, a neurosurgeon or he was a surgeon, and he's now quit that full time, and he does these deep studies into longevity. So he has a very interesting book called Outlive, and in fact, one of the other podcasts that I listen to is called the Tim Ferriss Show.
Oh, Tim Ferriss Show.
And Dr. Peter Attia was one of the guests on the show. Right? So that's how I kind of stumbled on this guy. And fascinating guy. I mean, he has his own podcast as well. It's called, I think, The Drive or something like that. But largely, he's like this guy who, like we were discussing earlier, right? Like there are two things, right? There's a physical, there's a chemical input to your body, right? And he goes really deep into the biochemistry of it, right? Saying that what are the things that have changed in our current lifestyle that influence your longevity, right? So, for example, there are these blue zones in the world where people outlive 100 years, etc., right? So, there are some 7-8 pockets in the world. And of course, there are studies done on what was different versus the rest of the population, etc. But he goes deep into the scientific biochemistry aspect of why do we, need this Why do we need protein? Why is sugar bad? So on and so forth. Right. So a lot of this is coming up as a health fad right now, but he just takes a very different approach. He goes very scientific first, right? So in fact, there are 3 sections to the book. The first 2 sections are very dense because they actually talk about the human body and how are some of these molecules breaking down. Why do we need to do some of these? And the third section is about, hey, how can I improve my lifestyle, right? So, but like you won't appreciate the third section till you've gone through the first 2, because he's not just giving you a hack. He's telling you, hey, this is something that influences your internal biochemistry, right? In fact, his last chapter is about mental health. And he says the entire book is useless if you don't, get that right. So a lot of this is such a continuum, right? Like your physical health, what you intake, your mental health, that it's very easy to get isolated into saying, hey, I'm going 1 hour to the gym and that's enough. But maybe it's you need to do like so many things as well for that 1 hour to make an impact.
Correct.
Is how I'm thinking.
Like, I think if there was an ideal customer for that particular book, considering where I am in my life, I think I'd definitely pick it up. Thank you so much for the recommendation. And that is a long read. Do you subscribe to any newsletters and stuff like that when you open your laptop or on your phone? Do you read anything like that? Short form reading, stuff like that?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of newsletters, right? So the Knowledge Project also has a newsletter. So I kind of consume that. There is also a newsletter that comes from the Ken, the Nadka.
Correct.
So kind of that's also an interesting one. Goes deep in business, I think.
Right.
Most of Ken's stuff is deep in business,
Yes.
so I kind of consume that one. And then I think Tim Ferriss comes out with a thing called 5 Bullet Fridays. So he has these 5 bullet points, fairly interesting in terms of what he talks about there. So when I have the time, then I go through that one as well.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, these are a bunch of the things that look at. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, the next segue is what is your, not necessarily to understand very deeply or snoop in, what does your typical week look like? Or beginning from Monday, the moment you start checking your emails and stuff like that, how do you plan?
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'll caveat this, right? Like, look, because I'm driving a sales function, right? Maybe my week would be very different to, let's say, most others in a ShareChat environment, right? Like, I think any business that you're driving, right? I think it's important to take reviews and take stock of where you are. So Mondays are typically that day of the week when you take stock of how the business has done in the last week. What is the pipeline? How much is the revenue that you're looking at? Some basic estimates of, what's the forecast for the month, next month, so on. So a lot of business brass tacks is what a lot of Monday is dedicated to, right? So first half is generally with my team, and then the second half is me kind of with my managers and so on, right? So a lot of Monday gets accounted for with that. But typically, because it's my nature of role is very client facing, I would say, I generally travel a lot, right? Because a lot of your large, you can say, advertisers, marketers are based out of either Delhi, Gurgaon or Bombay, some in Bangalore as well. So generally I end up traveling on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday or something like that to either of a Delhi or a Bombay.
Right.
And I think the best part or what I like about my job is that I actually get to meet the client, right? Like, and essentially understand from them, how are they looking at their business, right? And then kind of piece together. See, because we have categorized our clients by industries, right? So let's say I meet a Samsung today, I'm meeting a OnePlus tomorrow, I'm meeting Oppo and Vivo. By talking to, let's say, the mid to senior level in marketing in all of these organizations, I can actually piece together what's happening in the handset industry in India, right? Because like some of them are focusing on one thing, some of them have a bet on the other and so on and so forth. But if you try and kind of take a step back and connect the dots on what their challenges, priorities, KPIs are, you actually can piece together, hey, what is the Indian handset ecosystem looking like, right? And you have an inside view to that because you kind of interacting with all the major handset guys, right? And same thing true for, say, e-commerce, online, D2C, whatever, right? Or computing and so on, right? So I think that's a very interesting part because I think the rest of my week largely goes in terms of either trying to understand what the pain points of my clients are, and hence how do we as a platform fit into the entire mix of what they're trying to do, right? Either from a acquisition point of view, retention, or whether it's more up funnel, down funnel, performance driven, etc., what is the solution that they're looking for, what's the audience type, does it sit on us, and so on. And growingly, we've also seen that a lot of advertisers want to move away consciously from the walled gardens, right? Today, a lot of 80% spends on digital are going to Google and Meta, and we can't help that. But the idea is, are there other channels that are out there? Is on every marketer's mind that have decent scale and size and can also help me meet my objectives, right? Be it top, mid funnel, whatever, right? So I think that's one white space that we are trying to solve for, saying that, hey, this is one, non-walled garden place which is India first and so on, which not just solves for, let's say, a reach frequency kind of buying, but also I think our moat is very different, right? Like I was telling you earlier, our moat is, at least at a ShareChat level, is that we are language first. And secondly, a lot of content that you can find on Moj, right? So I'll give you an example. A lot of influencers who create content on Moj might also have, let's say, an Instagram presence and so on and so forth, but they'll not have that kind of fan base. Because on Insta, you come for a English consumption, right? Or maybe Hindi or whatever, right? But if you're looking for a Tamil consumption, your natural choice is not Instagram, right? So that's why I say that our influencers have a very strong and sticky base, right? So, and look, a lot of this is a function of the last 2-3 years, right? So obviously marketers, won't be aware, or even if they're not aware of the full potential of what the platform can offer. So a lot of my role and my team's role is consultative selling to them, saying that this is what you can do, right? This is what you can leverage as you're looking at other avenues, other platforms, and kind of help them deliver their KPIs. Right.
Very interesting. In your capacity, do you just encounter and work with brands or also agencies and advertisers as well?
Yeah, so essentially it's an ecosystem play, right? Like most big brands typically have agencies and so on and so forth.
That's true.
So yeah, it's like very tightly knit in terms of, even if we interact with the brand, like the final brief, POs, etc., would anyway get routed through the agency, right? So it's a kind of a dance between both of them, which is very important. Yeah.
What is the SMB's appetite, for example, just to hop back on ShareChat? Is there SMB appetite to experiment?
Yeah, absolutely. See, I think the best part about digital, right? It's not prohibitively expensive, right? Like it's not like I need to plan a TV campaign and hence I need to park aside crores.
Any budget is welcome to experiment.
Correct. Any budget is welcome to experiment. And the good thing is that, and I'll give you examples, right? Like, because you are digital and because we are local first, or we are Indic language first, our incremental audience on Meta is largely coming from our language first stage, right? So and it's surprising to a lot of our clients also that, hey, you have incremental on Meta, but we do because we are language first, right? Which means that, let's say, if you're trying to do activation in, let's say, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam markets, there's a good chance that we actually will be a preferred platform of choice as compared to, let's say, some of the others, right? Now, where does the entire mid-market SMB play happen is largely because they don't want to do a pan-India campaign where they're not operational and so on and so forth. And probably they want a cut and cohort even on the places that they are there to make it more sharper and so on and so forth, right? So obviously we have like a thriving mid-market SMB business, but more importantly, digital as a medium gives you that power and that capability to not just slice and dice audience based on geo or whatever, but also based on language consumption, affinity. So today, like for example, the platform offers a lot of apography data, which is to say, hey, does this person in Tamil Nadu also have other payment apps, for example?
Okay.
Right? So you can actually target somebody who is actually on other payment apps, or does he have other online shopping apps? So you can actually create cohort of users to do this, that, and just target them. Right? So that makes your campaign more tighter, but also channelizes your spends in a much more efficient manner, more local, more granular. Correct. Yeah. So it's about both, right? It's about being effective as well as being efficient, right? Because a lot of what algos of the walled garden solve for is just efficiency, not necessarily effective.
So it's a good point, actually. Interesting. Now, do you extensively travel for work? Do you get to attend industry events, anything of your interest?
Yeah, so in fact, I mean, just I think 2 weeks back, there was this event that happened in Bombay. So it's called the Goa Fest. It happens in Goa every year. I think this year it happened in Bombay, which was again a lot of industry folks from the advertising marketing fraternity met. Last week there was this ET Brand World Summit that happened in Bombay.
Okay.
Which was again a lot of marketing leaders came down for a one-day kind of leadership kind of a summit that happened in Bombay. In fact, one of the things that we as ShareChat are also consciously doing is that, because we are also in that space where, we were, at least for the last year and a half, not aggressively spending to acquire. Because obviously there is, like we were discussing, profitability, growth, etc., right? We were not spending to acquire, still our DAOs and MAOs were holding up, right? So one of the things that we are actually planning to do from a marketing lens is now actually build industry symposiums. Because that's like, so we are actually having our first, we are calling it the short form video leadership summit.
Wow.
Which is happening in Bombay and Gurgaon in August
this year.
Yeah. So first week of August it's happening in Bombay, and then last week in Delhi.
Right.
Where because I think a lot is not spoken about in terms of short form content, right? And there's a lot of opportunity there, right? Because it's very nascent, it's very new. Marketers have not necessarily fully tested it out, right? There are still large number of marketers living in that 30-second ads era, right? Saying, I made my TVC, now how do I run it on digital, right? But how do you start thinking vertical video first? How do you start thinking short form first? Because user has moved there, right?
Correct.
Marketers have not, that's a different issue.
Right.
But users have already moved there. Right?
We keep on saying that the attention span is
Correct.
going down.
Yeah.
Something has to be done there.
Correct.
This is remarkably.
Yeah. So we are doing these two summits just to kind of create a lot of noise in the industry about the format, right?
So one is the short video. What is it called? The one event is called?
So it's called the short form big impact. That's how.
Fantastic. Okay.
And it's a leadership summit. So all the marketing, advertising leaders are basically invited.
Okay.
Again, we are doing this in Delhi on 28th August and Bombay on 7th August.
Nice. Interesting.
Yeah.
But my next question is, when do you get time to attend events?
See, the good part about such events, right, is that a lot of the people who is your core target group whom you want to sell to is also in these events, right? So
correct.
So it's essentially like this is a congregation of a lot of them coming together, right? And typically, see, these events are not, and like, for example, the one that we are doing in Delhi or in Bombay are 4 or 5 hours in the evening. That's it. So it's not like for example, I think the Goa Fest was a 2-3 day long event, etc. Where you have like different things happening and so on and so forth. These events are slightly more curated, and it's not necessarily about the scale of the event, right? Like we are intending to have not more than 80-100 people.
Yeah.
But if you have the right audience, then you are able to deliver your communication in the right manner for them. Then I think that's what's important, right? Like, and this is very important from B2B lens, right? That even if, let's say, you're doing these roundtables or whatever hot leadership events, it's not so much to do with the scale. It's so much more important to have the right audience in.
Correct.
And that's far more important than necessarily saying, hey, I had 300 people or 400.
Days was it? How many people attended, etc.
Yeah. So as long as your content, and look, it would be ironical to have a short form video thing to go very long, right? So yeah. So the tighter it is, the sharper it is.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. Now, I have this interesting question. I want you to put on your user hat as a consumer of all these apps. Be it e-commerce, social media, short form, long form, whatever it is. What is the one thing you love about these apps? And what is the one thing you would love to change?
Yeah. So the one thing that I love about, I think, social media in general, of course, these apps in particular, but in general about social media is that I think social media has really democratized content. Right? What I mean to say with that is today, you don't need to be a celebrity with a high-end camera, production unit, etc., to create a content that people will love, enjoy, and really share with their community, right? Today, if you have a smartphone, every smartphone today comes packed with a lot of, megapixels of camera power, etc. Today, a smartphone is so strong, and social media as a platform gives anybody, right, of different age, demography, language orientation, anybody, the power to create your own content and share it, right? So it's really democratized who can create content, what kind of content can be created, and of course subject to it's not abusive and all of that stuff. But as long as it's within the guardrails, anybody has the power to actually voice their opinion, talk about it, and kind of be out there, right? Which I think wouldn't have been so much possible in the pre-social media era, right? So that's fantastic, right? Like even if you were to think of LinkedIn, right? Today, one can always pen down their thoughts on any event that has happened to say that hey, these are the parallels that I'm drawing to my industry, or this is the parallels that I'm drawing to how I am seeing things, etc., etc. And you create your own kind of community of people who will interact with that content, right? Either they will love it, hate it, whatever it is, right? But they will interact, right? And hence, in your own version, you are a creator, you have created something, and there are people interacting with your creation, right? Which was very restricted earlier, right? Either you're an artist or you're an actor or somebody like that. Only then you could kind of afford to do something like this. Today, that afford factor has gone off, right? Anybody can do it, right? So that's the power of the platform. And of course, with social media, 4G, 5G, lower price points of smartphones, it's just increasing, right? The downside is exactly that, right? The downside is you're in a bubble, right? And I think where it gets borderline dangerous is that if you are fairly young and you've not experienced the world enough,
impressionable.
Yeah, you're impressionable. You actually start believing that that's how the world operates, right? Like, which is coming back to what I was saying, right? It's not only young, right? Like even very experienced older people can fall into this trap of, and which is why I was saying divergent thinking, divergent reading, is because you can easily fall into a trap of this is how the world works because me and the 10 people on social media think that, this is how it works, right? Like that's a very, very dangerous place to be, because then you start obviously you start negating counter arguments, but more importantly, you just feel that any counter argument is flawed, right? Like I think the fundamental is that you need to have an open mind to say that any argument, of course, backed by facts and logic and data and so on and so forth, can stand its ground. And many a time it may be contra to my argument.
Correct.
Right. So I think that's the challenge, right? Because social media, because it's trying to optimize for your engagement and your retention, doesn't do so much of explore and does more of exploit, saying that let's exploit the genres that you are, like for example, you open Netflix, right? You will see some 10 recommendations. It's all largely based on what you have watched in the past, some signals they picked up, etc., etc. It's amazing to keep you hooked on to that kind of content. But if you come out of that thinking that, hey, only Korean serials rock, right? Or whatever, right? Because then maybe, hey, you don't know there are like hundreds of genres out there which people are consuming and those are also doing well, etc., etc. While this is a very lighter example, it can go to different extreme aspect if you're discussing point of views and so on and so forth on social media. So I think that's something that's hard to control, but at the same time, it's not a great thing, right?
Exactly. I mean, even as recommendation engines improve, there's still a long way to go, because for one example is if I look at home remedies for headache on Insta, it thinks I have a headache every time.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
All days of the week. We have to be very mindful, beautifully said, about what we consume. And look at this podcast, actually. Just about what? We started in Jan this year. And who could have thought that you could create your own broadcast TV channel 30, 40 years ago? And today it is possible with very little. So have you been on other conversations like this before?
So I've been on one or two of these conversations before, but yeah, I mean, I think, and again, democratization of content, right? Today, every space, right? Like even let's say publishing has become so much easier, right?
Yeah.
With of course, I think Amazon, etc., has really helped the cause. But even for an author to be self-published today, right? It's so much more easier than, let's say, back in the day when you need to have influence with publishers to get your first draft and get the feedback and so on. So one is, of course, the life cycle of getting a book to life has reduced, but more importantly, even anybody can publish, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no barrier in terms of, hey, only if you're a successful author or some background like that, right? So I think that's great, because it gives so much more content to be available to users. And then, of course, you can pick and choose in terms of what you want to consume. But it just increases your funnel at the top, right? So that's a good thing.
Fantastic. The thing I like about the same question which I asked you, what I love about these apps is, it has democratized user-generated content. That is fantastic. Why is YouTube still the king of streaming?
Yeah.
The catalog which you were talking about, what are they doing to acquire that? Pretty much nothing. But that is the power of lowering the barrier of entry. And the thing which I really, really want something to be done is these bloody email apps where you get a ton of sales email. I don't know what needs to be done, but I don't know what your experience is. I'm sure you get a ton of emails. And we're talking about how the engagement of email is going down. Who has time besides what you subscribe to religiously? You have allegiance to it, yes. But otherwise, what do you do? What it just goes to a spam filter, or sometimes it doesn't because it's just right in front of you. Sometimes the subject line is so enticing, you click on it and it's a salesy message.
Correct. Yeah.
What do you do in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard now to drive or land messaging through email. Like that's the honest truth, right? Like unless the person is actually subscribing to your content, right?
Correct.
It's very hard to get that person to read/action on an email that you have sent, which is sales forwarding. Very hard. It's very hard, right? Like, in fact, a lot of these emails that I get, right? Like literally, if you open like my personal Gmail account, other than like the bunch of newsletters that I spoke about, which I will consume on a weekend or whatever when I have leisure, I mean, rest everything is unread, right? Like literally, there is nothing else that I click on, open on, because one is of course sales emails. Then you never know what is phishing, what is spam, all of that stuff, right? Like so email as a channel for me has become extremely transactional, right? Saying ki these are the 2-3 things I'm going on my email for. One is of course if there is high intent, like I'm going to an email for some specific action where I have to revert to, or my kid's school has sent an email, then it's a different thing.
Correct.
But if I have to consume at leisure, then it's generally those 3-4 newsletters that I'm looking at, and that's it. Then there's no other interaction with any other mail.
Absolutely.
Irrespective of how enticing the subject line is, because see now, what's happened to that subject line is that has got abused to the next level. Everybody is trying to be more creative in terms of, अच्छा इसमें higher open rates आता है तो ये डाल के emoji भी डाल दो इसमें and put that also. So the point is, if something gets utilized too much, right, it loses its novelty.
Yes.
That has exactly gotten happened with first the email, now the subject line of the email.
Yes.
That there's no fun anymore saying, okay, this looks interesting, but I know either it'll be sales or it'll be spam, right? Like so I think that's one challenge, right? For email as a tool itself, right? Like unless you have that specific person's work email ID,
yes,
and then you are targeting them on work with a very pertinent thing to what they are working on currently, the chances are it's just going to be unread or in the spam box.
And I mean, even this timing of sending the right message, the right time, which is extremely relevant.
Correct.
Is a very narrow window.
Yeah.
I think I have this theory of emails are becoming like mobile phone calls we get. How often will we pick up an unknown number? We don't, unless and until somebody says this person is going to call you. They may not give you their number, but say, at least you anticipate something. Or you know somebody, they're in your phone book, contact book. Email is exactly like that. If I don't know this person and somebody has written, 9 out of 10 times I'm not going to open it.
Correct.
I mean, as a marketer, I think this is very, very pertinent to understand.
Yeah.
And this brings this fantastic conversation to an end. I hope you liked being on the pod.
Yeah, Santhosh. So thanks first of all for inviting me. I had a fantastic time. It was a superb conversation. And I hope it was enjoyable to you.
Oh, absolutely. My God, there is a big gold mine of nuggets and information here. So usually what I do is I take this entire conversation, it goes to YouTube, the full length of it, and I cut it into bits and pieces, and it goes to LinkedIn and Insta and stuff like that. That's where it gets a lot of engagement.
God.
Thank you so much for giving your time, the 2 on a Saturday. And thank you again.
Thanks, Santhosh. Pleasure being here.